Everyone who runs seems to get injured sooner or later. I think the stats are about 50% of runners every year, or 30%, or it's some huge, terrifying percentage. This year, I've had a recurrent problem with some knee pain, which I think I've talked about on the podcast before, and an upper hamstring tendinosis. After a lot of trial and error in the gym, some support from my physio, thank you, Ollie, I sort of came to the conclusion that my knee issues were due to poor hip and ankle mobility on my right hand side, which is worse than on my left hand side. And I get the pain always in my right knee. Also found that doing strength work, in particular deadlifts, seemed to help my hamstring tendon. And it helped it much more than stretching or resting. Actually working it with deadlift weightlifting. I guess like most people, I'm sort of learning the hard way that there's more to running than just running. And we're probably going to hear a bit about that today. Hi, and welcome to the Running Book Reviews podcast, where we review books written for runners, about runners, and by runners to help you decide if you'd like to read the book for yourself. We also hope that listening to us chat about running can help keep you motivated about your own running and maybe inspire you to try something new or different. My name's Alan, and with my co-host Liz, we're going to talk today with author Matt Silver about his book, Built to Run.
Built to Run is a book to help runners improve form, mobility, and strength so that they can run injury-free more often. Because we all know we'll eventually get some kind of niggle, but the idea is that we're not sidelined for months at a time. The book has 8 chapters, starting with an explanation of your body as a system, moving on to training mobility and strength, and ending with breathing. Yes, we can actually train that, and common running injuries as well. A little bit about the author. Dr. Matthew Silver is a coach, educator, physical therapist, and founder of Alpha Project Phyzio and Performance. He has been a distance runner for the past 13 years. While a freshman in high school, he fell in love with distance running and hasn't looked back since. He was first exposed to physical therapy after suffering from runner's knee and low back pain while running cross country. After high school, he ran collegiately for 2 years when he set his college's 8K record and made the all-conference team. This was bittersweet as he could not finish the last 2 years of his collegiate career due to his recurrent and persistent knee and low back pain, despite going to multiple medical practitioners. Believing his competitive running career was over, he decided to focus on his education by learning as much as he could about running injuries and physical therapy. And it's a good thing he did because he wrote this book. He started to notice a trend of runners getting prescribed cookie cutter exercises, being told they need new shoes, or even worse, being advised to stop running altogether to avoid their pain, rather than addressing the underlying dysfunction that is causing their pain. Because of this, he has developed a unique interest in injury prevention and rehabilitation through movement quality. So, welcome to the podcast, Matt. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. As I was saying before, I know you guys see a lot of books, you read them. I'm glad you guys made time to get the book and have me on here, but also read it. And yeah, I'm excited to dive into whatever topics you guys want. I'm ready.
Great. So we'll start as we usually do with the big question. How did you decide to write this book? Because writing a book is no small feat.
A big reason for me was, I mean, you kind of said it in my bio. I've been an injured runner. I know exactly what it's like. A lot of motivation for me of becoming a becoming a physical therapist was I was injured and I went to PTs, I went to physios, and I didn't get better. Not knocking the profession, but it's runners very specific things. Running's very niche, and like we have to know that runners, we need a lot of ankle mobility, we need a lot of hip mobility. We need to have like our calves need to be strong, and we have to make sure that we know we're doing jump training and strength training. There's so much to it that it just takes a lot of knowledge to be able to treat a runner. And for me, it was I used that motivation to want to treat myself, become a physical therapist. But then afterwards, I'm like, man, I'm still even when I became a PT, I knew I needed to know more than PT school taught me. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm good at treating runners. How can I help more people? and it was open up a physical therapy practice that specializes in treating runners. And after that, I'm like, well, now I'm in my community. I'm helping people here. Now, how can I help even more people around the nation, right around the world? And sure, I could grow my Instagram, I could make a YouTube channel, but I felt like the biggest impact I could make was the book. And it's a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but that to me, that's how I kind of got started on it, of the idea of I knew I wanted to do it. And I think that was like 3.5 years ago, 3 years ago. But it's a large endeavor. But that a big thing for me was I knew that this knowledge could help people, that I get it into a book and get it out into the world. Like that was to me, that's the best way I knew it. I could give back and help the running community.
Yeah, we might be a little bit biased, but like, I don't know. Alan probably agrees with me, but I find that getting knowledge from books, like when it's a topic that you don't know anything about, starting with a book, I feel like is always a better path towards like then later being able to kind of get other information elsewhere. I feel like books are just, someone sat down like you and they structured it in a logical way with all the information and then all the supporting information. And so you're kind of getting like a good overview that's like in chronological order. Whereas like from YouTube, like I love YouTube. I get lots of stuff from YouTube and I love that you can see people doing things on YouTube, which is often useful for like exercises and stuff. But at the same time, like you kind of have to figure out if like you're missing bits of information, whereas a book is,
I think
it's
the trouble
all.
with YouTube is because I'm a scientist from background. I'm a PhD pharmacist. Oh, here's my chance. Dr. Matt Silver, um, Dr. Alan Miller, and Elizabeth.
And not me. No, no doctor.
If you know,
Once again.
if you know the Big Bang Theory, I always refer to Elizabeth as the Wallowitz of the podcasting team.
I'm
When
I'm
I
the
have
Wallowitz
somebody
of the
with a
group.
PhD who comes on,
Actually, you'd be surprised
I like
how
to get that
many
one in.
authors have PhDs that come
Yeah,
on the
large number
podcast.
of them.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think the thing is with the internet is all the stuff that you look up on Google or YouTube doesn't come with references. So, I like to go to a book like yours, which has been researched, and you have the references listed in the back, and then there's some credibility. And if I doubt that, I can look at the references. Then once I've got that, I'm more confident in it. If I go, well, okay, Matt tells me that this is good for my running. I'm not quite sure how to do it. Then I can go to the internet and say, how do I do this? Show me a video of it. I think that's how we kind of look at it. The first thing that I want to talk to you about is running form, because I think maybe about 20 years ago, everybody was of the opinion, don't touch your running form. That's kind of you, it's your fingerprint, and you shouldn't mess around with it. And I think now increasingly we're getting into an environment where everybody says, well, what is this? Like, don't think about how you run. Like every other sport, you have
Mhm.
to learn the technique. And in running, you don't. You just go with whatever you happen to do as you grew up. And I think as I've got older, my running form has got worse because I've sort of got into a little bit of a crouch, then started to work on changing what was becoming my natural form and found that it's actually
Mhm.
helping me quite a lot. And so I'm very much in the advocacy of, hey, running form could be part of the secret source of making you quicker. You don't have to put energy in if you can adjust your form without getting injured and make yourself quicker. So what's your view on that? And what are some of the things we can do?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a contentious topic, because sometimes I'll post on Instagram and then
You
you
have
get
a whole
that a
bunch of
lot.
people giving you hate mail.
Yeah, well, it's not. It used to, in the beginning, it used to be a lot more. Now I rarely get it, but it's sometimes you get that. It's like, oh, don't touch your running form. Your running form's fine. You get your natural running form, and like some people are blessed, and like they
Mm.
they run very efficiently, and everything is working the way it should. But then you have other runners who, for whatever reason, like they're stomping the ground, they're overstriding, their hips are tight, so they don't have as much of that push off position on the back end. And we could get into the weeds if we want, but we know, like Alan said it, like there's all right, I'm not trying to be the squat police or the deadlift police, but like there's variations and there's leg lengths and there's some torsos are longer than others, the femurs are longer than others, and there's differences in squat technique, but we know there's a standard and there's a deadlift standard and how you should throw a ball. Like you don't throw a baseball with your elbow low, you have to get the elbow up. And yeah, the same thing happens for running form. We have to make sure we're running the right way. And this is just an example off the top of my head and this is how other impairments can influence running form. Strength can influence it, your mobility can. And let's just take mobility, where let's say your hips are tight. And as we age, we tend to lose this mobility. If we do a lot of sitting, I don't know how much sitting Alan did or how tight his hips were.
A
But if we
lot,
don't have, what was that?
a lot. I mean,
A lot.
I had an executive position. I would spend my whole day at the desk, pretty inflexible, and did a lot of sitting.
Yeah, the sit like not just sitting in general, but other things can influence it. So if we lose hip mobility, we can't get our leg behind us because our hips are tight. It's like that push-off position's like a slingshot or a bow and arrow, right? We want to pull it back. Our leg has to get back as we store energy and we release it. Like in Alan's case, if you don't have that hip extension, it's like you're pulling the bow back halfway and then trying to release energy. Well, no one like you're no, A, you're gonna have this shortened stride. It's gonna look kind of just awkward. But B, you're gonna have nowhere near the energy that you're gonna have if you were to get that full hip extension and your leg swings forwards from that stretch of the hip flexor. So I mean, we can keep talking about different running form impairments, but running form is huge, and a lot of things can influence it. And sometimes there's impairments, and other times it's just like, hey, we just got to teach you how to run. Like your mobility is great, you have the strength, like you're doing all the right things, but we just have to build this brain body connection of teaching you this downloading the software of what's the proper running form. So it's huge, but we have to understand there's different reasons why running form can become impaired.
Are there some things that you see more regularly? I'm thinking about, not really elite runners, but your average club runner. Um, we're really trying to speak to them a little bit. Are
Mhm.
there's some things which you see more than others? Do you take caffeine when you run? Lots of people do because it's in gels and stuff. And caffeine's legal and it's been proven to work. There's actual science that shows that it improves your endurance running performance.
And there's anecdotal data from when you have your coffee in the morning and you go for a workout versus when you forgot to have your coffee or you didn't have time and you went for a workout and it was terrible.
And the trouble with coffee is there's a lot of liquid just to get your caffeine dose.
Yeah, so then you have to stop for the bathroom mid-workout. Very impractical. Which is where Caffeine Bullet comes in.
What's caffeine bullet, Liz?
It's a caffeine supplement. It's wrapped up like in a candy. And it tastes like candy. And you can get 100 milligrams or 85 milligrams, which is about a cup of coffee, but without the liquid.
So we've tried the mint flavor and the chocolate orange flavor, and they're both pretty yummy.
If you want to try them for yourself, we do have a 20% off discount code. So go to the link in the show notes and you can check out what Caffeine Bullet is and get your 20% discount.
Pretty generous.
It is pretty generous.
And we'll get a small benefit, so you're helping out the
Speaking of which, back to the podcast.
Yeah, I'd say overstriding is probably the most common one. There's a lot of different causes for it, but think of this as when we run, we are leaning forward, so our center of mass is shifted forwards enough to where we fall and we catch ourselves and we keep falling. If you're landing too far out in front of that center of mass, we define that as overstriding. Essentially, think of that as if you land too far out in front. If we go back to physics class, some people hate physics. I'm sorry, but if you're landing too far out in front of your body, the ground's going to push you backwards with equal and opposite force. And if you're excessively, it's going to happen no matter what, and our body needs that. We respond to it. But if we're way too out in front, the ground's pushing excessively. It's slowing us down excessively. Then we have to reaccelerate every single step we take. So. And if you're running a 5K, that's 5,000 steps. So you're slowing yourself down and having to work harder 5,000 times during that 5K. So imagine 10Ks and it just exponentially gets higher and exponentially. No wonder why A, we could probably get you faster, but B, we're just overloading our bodies and that's causing issues. So I think overstriding is a big one. Another cause of that, going back to your case, Alan, sometimes can be if our hips are tight. We think of it like a pendulum. Like hip extension is what leg swings through. We push the leg behind us, leg swings through. if we can't get that extension on the back end, that pendulum it'll push excessively forwards. So our body, our leg wants to feel like it's going through the full pendulum, but it can't. So it compensates, and we end up overstriding. So a couple different causes for it, but overstriding, hands down, it's the most common one I see.
I certainly fall into the problem with hip extension, I think, probably because as you get older, you sort of go into an easier jogging style. And you see people doing this, say, well, I'm older now, so I'll just jog along. And then you don't use your full extension, and then you lose your full extension. Sort of it's a sort of use it or lose it type thing as you get older. So what do we do apart from strides and sprints and dropping those into to help us maintain good form and movement? Are there some stretches or something that you would recommend?
Yes. For
This
hip
is just me
extension,
getting a free consultancy from Matt Silver, by the way. Feel
this
free to tune out if you guys don't like this.
free hour consult. Well, I will say this. This
Excellent.
it's the hip tightness. It's one of the man, it causes hosts of issues in not just runners, but just in the population. Like we just tend to sit a lot, driving airplanes at work. Again, it's a big cause of it. I won't say it's the only cause of tight hips, but it tends to be an issue not just with runners, but with athletes with any sport. But to fix it, and in the mobility section, I believe that's chapter 3. But there's different reasons why things can be tight and stiff. For the majority of people, I think they're going to have tissues that are just shortened. So think of muscles that are just like we have to stretch them out to improve their actual length. So doing something, I call it's called the couch stretch, like your couch. I don't know why
Ah,
it's called
yes.
that.
Because you
Uh,
can do it while you're on the couch. You just get
yeah.
off the couch and do it.
Pretty much. It's you want to do it while you're watching TV, you're I don't know, playing Scrabble with your kids on the coffee table, whatever it is. The couch stretch. I always want to say couch stretch. It's not the
Yeah.
couch stretch, the couch stretch.
Couch stretch.
Um, that is hands down. If you do that, you're going to solve a lot of hip mobility problems.
Yeah, it's
But also,
interesting. Later on in my questions, our questions, down at about question number 7, it says, you seem to be a big fan of the couch stretch. What is this and how do we do it?
it just works. Like you'll get a stretch to your joint capsule. You'll get a stretch to the hip flexor, like your psoas and your TFL muscle, but also your quads get a really good stretch. In particular, your rectus femoris. It's the two joint muscle, and that muscle tends to limit a lot of extension in runners. So it helps us get into a position we're not used to, and it helps us get that push off. I will say this too, that's people would also probably benefit from improving tissue quality. So think of this as like if there's stiffness in the fascia, there's stiffness in like a muscle knots, essentially think of it that way. It could be from some neurologic reasons we can talk about, but a lot of
Mhm.
times it's from like we have to get in there and hit it with a lacrosse ball and do some soft tissue work. So soft tissue work to the quads and hip flexors also can, I think, would really benefit people. So I guess stretching it with the couch stretch and also I'd recommend a harder foam roller, like a harder surface, just a harder material, or something like a lacrosse ball or a harder yoga ball, and releasing the quads that way.
Now you've
For
got everybody interested in how to extend their stride mobility. So you need to actually describe to us quickly, if you would, please, what is a couch stretch? I know what it is because I've read the book,
We
but
have
our
yeah.
listeners
photos.
our listeners don't.
Yeah, it's so essentially all you can use a tall box. The couch just it works well because your foot's typically able to be nice and relaxed.
Hmm.
Essentially, there's 3 progressions to it. You kind of get into like both knees are on the ground position. One knee is right up against the box, and your knees your heels close to right, it's pretty much touching your butt. And then you bring your other leg into a lunge position, and that's position 2, where you want to get to the point where you feel that stretch. Position 3 is you push yourself up and you're actually in a tall lunge versus like a leaned over lunge. It's kind of hard to describe, but I guess the best way to describe it is you go from both knees on the ground, one knee's against the wall or the couch. You bring a leg up into a leaned forward lunge, and then I put both hands on my knee and I push myself up into that tall lunge. And as you get higher, as you bring that leg up, you'll put more stretch on the hip joint, the hip flexor, and that quad muscle. And sometimes you'll feel it like all the way in the quad. You'll feel it higher up. Sometimes it's lower towards the knee. So, or like the outside of the quad, people get that a lot of that if they have IT band issues because that outside quad that can contribute to that. You might feel it in different areas, but the couch stretch it tends to work for it works fantastic for improving hip extension. Depending on whatever the reason is, it works well of what I found.
And then you actually really like the Bulgarian split squat in terms of like a strength exercise.
Mhm.
And actually, you even say that if there's one exercise that everyone should do for the rest of their life, it's that one.
Yep.
Um, so does it kind of go along with the couch stretch in that it helps like our hip extension? Because I like when I do the Bulgarian split squat, I don't know if that's right or not, but like I kind of feel the same stretches that I do in the couch stretch.
Yep. Yes, 100%. There's different variations of the Bulgarian split squat. Sometimes people hinge over more. You won't get that stretch as much, but I like to do it where I'm tall. And because that back leg, it's on a bench, it's on a chair, and the knees bent a lot. Like as you go
Hmm.
down, you're putting yourself into a couch stretch on that side. And I like the 80-20 or I like the 90-10 rule really, where the front leg is doing 90% of the work. The back leg's doing 10% of the work. So if that back leg really is nice and relaxed, it goes into that active stretch every time you do the split squat. So I'm a huge fan of that because you get that mobility aspect on the back end of the Bulgarian split squat, but also on the front end, you're working on glute strength. You're working on single leg strength, really. We list all the muscles, but
Mm.
single leg strength that we need as runners. And also motor control. Like you're going to be a little bit wobbly. I love, hey, let's be barefoot. Let's press our toe into the ground, as long as you can, as long as your gym allows you to, or wherever you are. But yeah, there's three things. It's you get mobility on the back leg, you get strength on the front leg, and you also get this motor control balance work as well on that front leg. So I'm a huge fan of the Bulgarian split squat, especially when I get it. I know a lot of runners. I get it myself. We're strapped for time. How can I get the most bang for our buck? And if you're like, I want to start strength training, but I have 30 minutes or I only have 20 minutes, which is fine. Do the split squat, start out, and then eventually you can hold a heavy kettlebell like right in front of your chest. Like you can get heavy with that. And I do recommend people squat and deadlift, but man, you can get a lot out of that split squat just by adding that to your strength regimen.
When would we do all of these things? So, I mean, I guess the Bulgarian split squat, you do that with your strength training. But for the
Mhm.
stretching, if let's say we're trying to increase muscle length, then we can't do it before the run. So, how do you suggest that people sort of time everything? Like, what would be in an ideal world if nobody had family obligations and all they could do was like run and do all the things around their running?
Mhm.
Then, when would you do the strength training
Mhm.
in terms of before or after the run? When would you do the stretching in terms of before or after? And also, would you split it up? So, like,
Mhm.
strength in the morning, run at night, or would you do like the inverse?
Good question. This I could tackle stretching first. Stretching, hands
Okay.
down, like static stretching, where you're just here, you're holding a position for a long period of time. That definitely do that after your run. What if you do it for like 10 or 15 seconds? Okay, all right. I guess that's an okay warm up. You could add that on. But what tends to happen is when you stretch a tissue out that long, in the short term, it's actually a neurological. Like people get like I immediately get improved hamstring mobility when I stretch my hamstrings. We're probably didn't. We're not like tearing tissue in that short period of time, and then it rebuilds and it's an elongated position like that. That can take months. It takes a long time for that. What's actually happening there is you're getting a neurological response where your nervous system senses the tension and it says, "Okay, relax, relax, relax," and then your hamstrings relax a little bit. So in the short term, we can hold it for like 15 seconds. It's just fine. But at the problem is when that muscle relaxes, it's not going to be able to produce as much force. So
Okay.
if we're going to hold the stretch for, hey, I want to hold this for 2 minutes, that neurological effect is 100% going to kick in. It's going to kick in a lot. We want to do that afterwards because I don't want you to, hey, I have a tempo workout or a threshold, or I'm going to go heavy Bulgarian split squats. Unless you're really stiff in an area, there's a few times there's exceptions. Like if your quads are just insanely stiff, maybe we actually want to turn them off just a little bit. But for the 99% of people, it's the general rule of thumb is do these afterwards, especially if you're going to hold it for 2 minutes, minute and a half to get this long-term effect. Because it's going to turn your muscles off. The couch stretch is going to turn your quads off, and that's going to limit your ability to have a good interval or a threshold workout or marathon pace or long run. So I recommend, hey, let's stretch things after. You can lacrosse ball, like tissue work, like using a lacrosse ball or a foam roller, that can be done before or after. It has this effect where it's going to improve blood flow. It's going to turn like people who like have used the Theragun and it's like, oh my gosh, my calves are sore, and then oh, it feels a lot better after that.
Mhm.
There's a little bit of a similar effect there where it helps turn a nervous system on and just gets muscles ready to work. So lacrosse ball stuff, I'm good before or after. So feel free if you got a calf issue, you can roll that out before you run. But hands down, stretching, rule of thumb is let's do this afterwards. If you're going to do it for 10, 15 seconds, you'll get a little bit of a neurological response, and it's not the end of the world. But after, we definitely want to do it afterwards if you're going to do it for like a minute and a half, 2 minutes.
And does being warm from the run at all help anything, or it doesn't really matter? Like if you're gonna do those long stretches.
I mean, it will. It'll if you're like, hey, I'm going to do this right after I run. Like, you're warmed up. You're probably going to get farther anyway, which is good.
Mhm.
It's not. I wouldn't say it's that you necessarily need to, but also, which I get it. People have families and kids, and like my son's due December 16th, which is like a month away.
Oh,
Uh,
congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I'm about to be a lot more busy. But for me, I'm like,
Good
hey,
thing
if
the
I
book is finished.
it actually have a funny story we can talk about later about my wife found out she was pregnant the moment the book came in. And I was like, what am I more excited for? Obviously, my son, not the book. The
Two
right
babies.
answer.
Two
Yeah,
babies.
yeah, two babies at once. But yeah, if you're like, hey, I only have this, I had this time blocked out to run, boom, hit it right afterwards. It's just that way too. Like if I get home and I stop running, I get into other things. I'm at home mode.
Hmm.
I might forget. So for static stretching. That's what I would do. That's why we say, hey, dynamic stretch first, static stretch afterwards.
Yeah.
For the strength training, the most important thing is you are getting it in. Um, I can talk about the ideal situation in a second, but as long as like I think as long as we can get it in, I'm happy with that. And whether it's before you run, after you run, I'm a bigger fan of if it's a harder workout, I'd rather you do it after you run because in my opinion, I just don't want you to be fatigued during your threshold and your tempo workout. Like it's gonna fatigue you going heavy. Like if you're doing
Mhm.
heavy split squats, like I want you to have the energy for the run and
Yeah.
be able to work out afterwards. And there's a couple different school of thoughts. There's two things. If you're a more elite runner and they're like, hey, this is your job and you're a collegiate runner, excuse me. If you do like keep your fast days fast and explosive and keep your slow days slow. So if you're going, I have a threshold workout, interval workout, hey, actually strength train after that day. Like as long as you can handle that. I think a lot of runners who are, hey, I'm here, I'm having fun with running, or I'm trying to run, a 4 hour marathon, whatever you're trying to do, and you're just, hey, I know I'm not elite, get it in, and whether that's on a hard day, whether it's on an easy day, like if you can fit it in, just go for it. It doesn't matter before or after easy runs. It shouldn't matter too much. Um, One thing we have to look out for, though, I will say this, and I actually earlier in I think it was July or June. I went to Flagstaff, Arizona, and I ran with the Run Free Training Club. That Ryan Hall he founded it, and he talked about like his experience as a pro runner. And one thing he said was it's and I'm glad he said this because it makes a lot of sense to me that as runners, like our main thing is running. Like to me, strength
Yeah.
training, yeah, we can build strength, and I want us to be able to move around the world and be able to squat to a low depth and deadlift heavy weight. But we're running. Like our main objection is running, and like it's hard to be really good at both. So especially when you're training hard, like if you do too much strength training, you might be too sore to complete some of your workouts. So true, hey, you're getting really heavy with split squats and deadlifts and squatting. Really, 2 to 3 foot like lower body strength days, it tends to be the max. Like you shouldn't really be doing more than you're getting heavy
Hmm.
2 to 3 days a week. And that doesn't mean you can't do you can have an upper body day, you can do push-ups and do a little bit like lighter weights on a third or fourth day or do accessory work. But and I know people are strapped for time anyway, so this might not be a big issue, but there might be some runners who are higher level that say, hey, I really want to take this seriously. You can. I just, if you're running a 2:30 marathon or a 3 hour marathon, I don't let the strength tail wag the distance running dog. Like I don't want to become power lifters all of a sudden. I want you to lift heavy, but I don't want all of a sudden you're taking away from your running training. Like to become a better runner, we have to run. And strength training is a big part of that, but it can be challenging to fit in more than 2 to 3 days of that lower body strength training because we become too sore to complete our workouts.
So actually, since we're on the topic of strength training, there's 6 foundational movements that you explained in the book. So I'll just list them because there's a question after that. But it's squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, and carry. So basically, all of those are things that we should be doing in our strength training.
Mhm.
So let's say that we're gonna aim for, I don't know, we're gonna aim for 2 days of strength training because I think like 2 days for most people is like a sweet spot where they'll actually do it. Sometimes when you put 3 days, they end up doing one, because they're
Yeah, it's too much.
overwhelmed by seeing it on the calendar. So for like, let's say that we're planning 2 days a week, how would you split those up? Would you just have like one exercise of each but like do the same thing for 2 days, or would you split those up and maybe have 2 days of different exercises?
It's a great question. Actually, I love this question because I get emails about this. It's like people who've gotten the
Oh,
book
wow.
and they're like, the strength training, which I do want to make a second edition and make it like I want to add actual like here's how you could format everything.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like how do we do this? So if you're doing 2 days a week, number one, you want to start. We'll definitely have a warm up, but you want to start with the main lift. And there's three bigger lifts we can do as runners. There's a deadlift, there's a squat. Those are the big two lower body ones. Like one's a hinge, where it's more of like a pulling motion. One's like the squat is more of a pushing motion, which both of these motions, like when your leg extends behind you, there's a pull, but also you're pushing into the ground. Like we have to have that pushing and that pulling motion. Both are important. But the third one's the Bulgarian split squat because it's a push. You can actually kind of turn it into a pull, but it's a push, but it's a single leg. Like running, we're either floating in the air or we're on one leg. So we have to have that. Like Bulgarian split squats need to be a part of or some level of single leg strength training. I think Bulgarian split squats are the best one. It has to be a part of a strength training regimen, and you'll get a good hormone effect. So what I mean by that is the big compound lifts, you get a hormone response to that. That's testosterone, that's growth hormone. It's stuff to help us maintain muscle mass if we're in the middle of training, but also build it maybe in an off season because a little bit of muscle mass it's not going to kill you as a runner. Like we need to have a little bit of muscle mass to just handle the loads of that running puts on us. And just for everybody who knows or everybody who doesn't know, when we're running, it's around 200 to 250% of your body weight every step you take. And if I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, if you're running a 5K, that's around 5,000 steps, 5,000 strides. So that's if I weigh 150, it's me like with a barbell on my back that has my body weight and probably a little bit more weight. It's a lot of weight every step you take. So we have to prepare our bodies for that. Sorry, that was just a quick side tangent on that
Yeah.
topic.
I mean,
Um,
that always puts it all into perspective for people, I think, when you mention that.
Yeah, and even like 2 days a week is completely fine. You can get your body will adapt the right way to be able to handle the loads of running. But you want to start with the heavier lift and always work your way up to it. Don't just start with if I'm Bulgarian split squatting and I'm holding a 50, like maybe just do some air ones and then add a 20, then a 30, and then get to your working sets. Maybe it's 5 sets of 5. I think in the book I talk about kind of just an easy range. There's typically 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 reps is where you want to be for strength training. So start with that, and then there's accessory work. So this can be, let's say you have a Bulgarian split squat. That was your main lift, and let's say you have 45 minutes blocked off. Takes you 20 minutes to do that. Now you have 25 minutes to do anything else. That could be if we know you have like a hip issue. Or you have like a calf issue. Like this is where we could add accessory work, where we could add hamstring curls, calf raises, hip kickouts, hip hikes to work that like lateral outside hip musculature, hip thrusts to get the glutes. But this is where we get that hinge, the pull, carry. You can do farmer carries in this time. You can do sled. I'm a huge fan of sled pushes and pulls for runners because pulls we get that we never run backwards. We always run forward, so we get that other motion. But sled pushes, it's your push, it's slowing it down a little bit. Where running, it's really quick, it's fast. We spend like 0.15 to zero point 0.2 seconds on it's really quick when we hit the ground. I love slowing it down and saying, hey, let's control that leg on the ground as it pushes off. So that's where we can kind of that 25 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, you have some more time. That's where we can add in the pushing, the pulling, the double arm farmer carries, single arm farmer carries, the core work. That's where we add all this other stuff on. So I split it up as, hey, let's make sure we have like 20 minutes. You're doing heavy lifting. the next 20, 40 minutes, this is all your accessory, even your physio stuff you can throw in here as well. This is where we can get heavy with other things of, I love adding on like hamstring curls. It's just other the big two muscles that we need as runners are strong calves and strong hamstring. So I love adding those on as well. But this is where you could add on the pushing, the carrying, the hip kickouts, the hip hikes, and anything else you want to, the plyometrics, jump training. This is where you add all that on afterwards. But the number one, you want to start with that big lift. Then I would probably go into plyos, now that I mentioned it, and then you could do all the other things.
Actually, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned plyos because there was another question about plyos that we had that came about because in the book you actually we've heard about plyometrics. I think everybody knows what plyometrics are, but you split it up into two different types. Apparently, you can have slow plyometrics and fast plyometrics, and apparently we need both.
Yeah, I'm gonna blank on the exact numbers. I know they're in the book. I'm kicking myself in the butt. I should have looked at it beforehand. But there's different like as you like running is a plyometric exercise. So think of that as it's actually this helps explain why running is 200% of your body weight, 250%. Well, like Matt, that's a lot of force. How are we able to take that many thousands of steps? Well, you're not it's think of it this way. Like if you go into a squat and you bounce out of it, it's a heck of a lot easier than if you slowly go into it and you pause in the bottom and you slowly go out. That takes a heck of a lot more energy. Running, it's bouncing, like where that plyometric is that bounce, where there's a quick stretch to the tendon, and then it's like a rubber band on a time limit. It rebounds back and you get that energy. The problem is if you're too slow, it's that you don't get as much energy back. So the whole point of the plyometrics is to teach you to hit the ground quick and come off the ground quick. And I want to do that on that's like jumping rope. That's a faster plyometric. It's a quick stretch. It's a faster one. Like you're going to spend less time on the ground. That's another one. There's the alternating plyo, which is like you could use a curb, 1 foot on, 1 foot off, and you just alternate like stepping on and off.
Hmm.
The slower twitch ones or the slower plyos are like a higher it's called a depth drop. So let's say you're on
Hmm.
like a 20-inch box, you jump off, you hit the ground, you explode back up. You're going to be on the ground a little bit longer, but the point of this is like you're going to be running at different paces. And if you're running faster, you're spending less time on the ground. When you're running faster or when you're running slower, excuse me, you're spending more time on the ground. So these plyos are meant for, hey, the slower stretch plyos where you're like the higher depth jump, you hit the ground, you're spending more time on the ground, you're coming off. Like that's gonna, hey, it's gonna help your plyometrics like overall, but I want you to be efficient at a slower pace. I mean, you're running with a buddy. How many times has someone been like, I run with someone slower than me, and then all of a sudden I get these aches and pains? I think I think this is a big part of that of, hey, I want you to be able to run slower and like not just blow up. But
Hmm.
also these faster twitch plyometrics which sometimes it's even less than zero point 0.1 seconds on the ground. I've seen Jada Cherry talk about that, where like it's great for bone health. But we want to have these plyometrics that are quicker on the ground that are going to help us with our faster paces, and also some slower ones that are going to help us. Hey, we're not always going to be running fast. We want to be our body has to be efficient as well of using this stress shortened plyometric contraction when we're running slower. So that's kind of why those are there. Some exercises, sometimes like with a wall ball, if you're not fast enough, it technically doesn't turn into a plyo. So I believe it's like once it's like half a second and beyond, I think we kind of lose some of that plyometric. So people can test this too. Like if you're not driving and you're at home, start jumping in the air and just kind of bounce. I want you to purposely stop on the bottom and then jump back up and stop on the bottom, excuse me, and jump back up. You'll feel the difference. Like it's like that's a
It's
lot
much
harder
harder.
to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
a lot harder. So the whole point of the plyos and the fastest slow is I want you to be an efficient jumper. Like running is a jumping sport. We have to get you better at jumping, and that's going to helps with cadence too. Of like, how do I improve my cadence? Let's start giving you some plyometrics, and your tendons and your muscles and your nervous system is going to become more responsive to that. Hit the ground quick and jump off into the air.
I heard you say the two most important muscles for runners were their calves and their hamstrings. And in your book, you talk not only just about calves, but specifically about the soleus, which is kind of not the meaty bit, the sort of stiff bit at the bottom of your calf, I guess, and the muscles. I'm trying to describe it for the lay person. So why is the soleus for runners so important? Is it because of this plyo bouncing effect? Why is it so important, and how can we strengthen it up?
Yeah. It is. It's hands down. It's the soleus is the most used muscle, and the hamstring is the second most used muscle. And the reason it's so important now is it can handle. I think it's just the reason for distance running versus like, because you have the soleus and you have the gastrocnemius, right? There's two calf muscles. The gastrocnemius is it's like you have those like two heads. It's higher up in the calf. That's a faster twitch muscle. So when you're sprinting, you run to 400. It's going to be used when you distance run, but it's more of a faster twitch muscle. You're sprinting at the end of your 5K, that gastroc's going to be used a little bit more than the soleus. But the soleus, I mean, it can handle like I can handle like 5, 6, 7 times your body weight. Like it is a strong muscle. It's slower twitch. It is a heck of a strong muscle, and it can just go, 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 go. So we use that a lot more when we distance run, and it's also used a little bit. It's used more when the knee is bent. So when we strength train this, instead of doing the straight knee calf raise, we do these bent knee calf raises.
Yeah.
But that soleus muscle, I mean, it's used a lot more when we walk too. Like it can just go and go and go and go and go. And talking about that too, the Achilles tendon is the reason. Talk about, hey, the soleus is the most used muscle when we run. Well, what's the most injury-prone tendon for runners? It's the Achilles tendon. Like that soleus pulls on it so much, and that's why we have to take care of not just the soleus but also that Achilles tendon. And just to put it in perspective, I forgot who said this. I believe Kelly Starrett. I learned this from him, or he told me this. You can hang a Ford Fiesta from your Achilles tendon, and it will not break. Like it's a very, very strong, very, very strong tendon.
Wow. I think you had something like that in your book as well, but it's kind of funny because like then you're just running along and you injure it all of a sudden.
Just following on from all these muscles that you use and all these exercises that you should preferentially perhaps target, it occurred to me that reading your book, there's a huge array of exercises for different reasons. And it's wonderful from that point of view, because if you have a specific need, you can probably get a specific diagnostic little manipulation to check, and then you can get some specific exercises that are going to target, and you can put those into your 20 minutes that you were talking about later once you've done your heavy lifting or whatever, to give you a personal benefit. But it occurred to me that there are no sit-ups or crunches or ab targeting exercises in the whole book. There's none.
Yeah,
So
there.
is that because we're all runners are like skinny weaklings and we don't need abs to show off to the girls? We show off by doing plus 5Ks or something. Is that the answer? Probably
Well,
not.
I mean, abs are good. I think it's in the it might. I believe it's in the counter rotation section, which
Okay.
is like I believe foot and the breathing section.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then there's no like
Specific.
specifically core.
Yeah.
But the reason why it's not in there is I think we understand that as run. I think we kind of got, hey, we could do crunches, we could do sit-ups. I think a lot of people, hey, I could do that for core. But for running, there's a lot of rotation that occurs. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of people might not be aware of that. As we run, we call it the spinal engine. We're rotating through space. As my right leg extends behind me, my pelvis follows that. As my left arm extends behind me, my thoracic spine, my spine follows that. So essentially, we get this it's this counter rotation where it's actually like if you think about the core, it's a short range plyometric on your core every time, because it gets twisted,
Mhm.
it tensions, and then it contracts
Yeah.
out and twists and so it's when you think about that, I'm a big nerd about it. It's really funky, and it's a really efficient way to move. But when we want to train the core as runners, we can do crunches like we want to, but we want to make sure we're hitting like laterally, like side planks, and we want to be able to control motion on the sides, but definitely need to be able to control and move through rotation through our spine. Like that's huge. And that's why I think I include it in the counter rotation, because it's just rotation is so
Yeah.
important for runners that rotational core exercises are, yes, we want to be strong, but also we have to be able to control the motion through the pelvis, through the foot. The foot's a part of it too, through the pelvis, foot, and the core. We have to be able to rotate the right way. That allows us. I mean, you see someone run, and like, man, they're smooth and it looks efficient. Like, how do they
Yeah.
do that? That spinal engine it's
Yeah.
doing its job. That's how we can look like a really efficient, smooth runner.
Okay, so there are core exercises and core strength exercises, but they tend to be more rotational aspects or counter rotational
Yeah,
strengthening.
yeah. There's a bunch of those in the book. There's definitely some for like the lateral core, and I think there's some for the front. There should be some. There's some for the back as well. The front core, I think there are a few for the front, but it's definitely more biased for rotation, the lateral direction, sideways, and also for the paraspinals. I actually had someone who I responded to his email right before I hopped on here, where the book actually really like helped him solve his back pain. Because he had years of back pain as a runner, and I was like, that is Which that's
Oh,
not talked
that's
about a lot
neat.
as well. A lot of runners have back pain, and
Hmm.
if you
Yeah,
could get
I've
your
heard that.
core and your back stronger, especially rotation, get your A, be able to rotate, and B, build up your back muscles and just handle that. Like we can handle the compression. It's just thousands of times it happens. Build up some strength in your back, like that can work wonders for runners.
Also, I guess the message is that rotation is not bad because I think in the running community, like it's all about not rotating your upper body, but like there actually should be some rotation.
Yes. I actually remember when I was in middle school, maybe it was my first freshman in high school. My coach said I had he said he called it the washing machine. I'd have a lot of rotation, but
Hmm.
I just couldn't control it. I mean, it was a fine running form, but then he told me that, and I think I stiffened right up, and I think that caused issues down the road. So I like rotation. I just want to be able to control it, not just limit it completely.
Great. So I know that you're pressed for time. So is there somewhere in particular that you want to direct listeners if they want to get a copy of the book? Because there's a lot more, like we kind of scraped the surface, but there's really a lot in
Yeah.
this book.
Yeah, the best way is you can buy directly from us. We have a 20% discount going on. Ever since the book came out, ever since I published it, I have a 20% discount of anybody who buys directly from us. So you could go to just if you Google "Built to Run" book, it should pop right up. Or go to alphaprojectphysio.com, and then there's a tab that says "Built to Run" book. You can click that. We also send you get a free gift when you get the book as well. So we just kind of there's some benefits of buying it directly from us, and you get added. We have a free newsletter that goes out every week with some great info of just how to stay healthy as a runner. I think my last one was on like arch strengthening and like how to actually turn your arches on. So if we ever have another podcast, that might be a good topic.
Mhm.
But that's a fantastic way to get the book. You can get it on Amazon. You just don't get all the perks and stuff. And then I guess a great way to reach me if you ever want to reach out or follow more of the content that I have. Instagram is probably the best. Matt Silver PT. And there's a link in the bio as well where you can click and you can find out where the book is. There's also a bunch of I have doctors approved products that there's discount codes with. Like I have Jada Tirius mobile board on there. There's a bunch of stuff that I have vetted. I use myself. Like I have proprioceptive insoles that I use that are just that they work. They help me turn my arches on that are in there as well. So a lot of products that people can get that I have vetted that I use myself every day in my clinic and personally. So that's how A, you get the book that way, and B, you can check me out on Instagram and all the fun things I like, nerdy running things I like to post about.
Added value.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before we let you go, I've got one, it's probably a good closure for our discussion, which is it's clear reading the book that you're really passionate, and it's clear talking to you that you're really passionate about motivating people to do more of the things that you talk about in the book that will help their running. So, what message do you have for people who, in inverted commas, don't have time for that stuff, or I just want to run. I don't want to do
Hmm.
that that
That strength training
stuff
thing.
in
Yeah.
Matt's book that he talks about.
Yeah, I think it's, I can't force someone to, you bring a horse to water, you can't force them to drink it. I think people tend to find that like you take it seriously once you start to personally have a problem with it. And uh,
Hmm.
so I think anybody who's like they're strength training and they're doing these things, it's because they probably had an injury in the past and they really enjoy running. They take it seriously and they don't want that to happen again. And that's why I take the thing seriously. I don't think I would nearly have done all these things if I didn't have a lot of issues when I was younger that stopped me from doing the thing that I love to do. So I think if you've been injured before, like you know it sucks. You don't want to ring the bell again. This info inside this book I know can help you. And if there's someone who's like, hey, I've never been injured, I'm new to running, I just want to make sure I'm doing it right. That's great on you. I love that mentality. Like this book can help. And I'm fortunate enough to where, as an independent author, like it just, I get to do a lot of things that sometimes when people publish through traditionally published companies, they don't get to do as many of these things. But I have an email, like I email people back and forth who bought the book and they just ask me for advice, like, hey, what do I do to solve, I have this knee thing. How do I solve this? Hey, go to this chapter of the book, try this thing. And a lot of times it fixes the issue. And they're like, hey, I went to PT for a long time. It didn't work. Sometimes people reach out and they want to work with me. Cool. Like, there's no pressure to do that. Like, I want to help you. Check this book out. And I've had a lot of people recently email of like, hey, I just ran this 50 miler and I PR'd by 35 minutes. I didn't have any back pain. Like the book helped me get through that. I'm like, dude, that's awesome. Like that's
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So that's the reason I wrote the book. That to me that is the biggest win of all of being able to help people that I've never even met before. I don't even know who this guy is. Never met him in my life, but he was able to run this 50 miler because the book helped him. So that's and solve his back pain. That again, people think like, yeah, you can solve running can cause back pain and we can have a strong back. But yeah, that's I get a soapbox or 2 cents of running. It's also a very injury prone sport. It's very repetitive. And we definitely need to be doing things to combat ourselves to not have these. It's that and CrossFit are probably the most distance running and CrossFit are probably two most injury prone sports. And we need to be doing things to keep us healthy as runners. It's not like football where you get slide tackled and you tear your ACL. Like runners could get degenerative ACL tears just they're 20, 30, 40 years later just because they didn't take care of and have strong knees and improve their running form and all these other things. So that's the big takeaway I would say is it's a very overuse prone sport. And if we could just take advantage of some resources like this book, man, it's going to make running. You're going to have a better bulletproof and more of a have a longevity as a runner. But yeah, no, I appreciate you guys having me on, and then I'll email you too. I would love to have a second day. I would love to talk about arch stuff because I have a plan for a second book. It's going to be all about feet and arches and just take a deep dive
That's
into
amazing.
that.
You're talking to someone that had plantar
Yep.
fasciitis for like
Yep.
the most god
We're right into
awful
that. And
amount
we
of
haven't
time.
talked about breathing.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh yeah. So
Yeah.
and
what I can do, I'll
give
email
you a
you.
few minutes.
Well, my son's being born mid-December.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's like maybe
New Year.
January, February, March.
Yeah.
Let's plan for something then. And I
Sounds
would love to
good.
Yeah.
dive into breathing and arch stuff because that's what I'm really passionate about.
That'll be
Okay.
excellent. Okay,
Fantastic.
you better get going. You've
We'll have
got
an
a
episode
client to
two.
see, and we
All right,
don't want to
guys.
be responsible for you getting bad customer service
Yeah.
reports.
All
Okay,
right.
take
Thank
care.
you. Have a good one.
Okay, so thoughts on Built to Run by Dr. Matt Silver. Well, when I go to the gym, I always take Jay DeSherry's book, Running Rewired, to the gym with me, and I guess now it looks like I'll be taking this as well to build some more customized programs for my specific issues, which is good news. The book has a large format and is filled with color illustrations of exercises, so that's a good thing to know. I think looking at Matt on our video conference, it looks like all the pictures of the main person in the book is actually Matt himself. Does that look like it to you?
I think so.
Running form and breathing are not things that we touch on a lot. And I think as I progress with my personal coaching, I think I'm going to sort of introduce a bit of thinking around both of those things, running form and breathing into my coaching. Because I think they're things that get ignored and you don't actually need any fitness to work on it. So it's not like, oh, I need to get fit. I'm not going to be able to do XYZ running training. Well, you can be at any level of fitness and work on your breathing or work on your form adjustments. For me, this book is a definite buy and read and use. And I think for some people, maybe many people, their next PR could be in this book and not in a better training program or a more intense running program.
So I guess I don't have much to add. I echo all of that. I'll just say that when I got this book, I was surprised by how big it was. Like it's really massive. But I mean, there's a substantial amount of reading, but there are really a lot of photos. And I think that's part of the advantages of this book. That's something that it really does well. So he doesn't just have like two photos of each exercise, sort of like the beginning and the mid or whatever. He really has a whole series of photos going through the exercise. And then he'll have examples of either ways to make the exercise harder, but also he'll show you common errors in the exercise. So that's also helpful because those are kind of the things we're usually missing. You know, we'll get a book about strength training. I know like that's kind of how I am. I kind of like read through the instructions. I try and look at the photos and I think I know what I'm doing. And I do have some strength training background. Uh, we used to get plans in university and we had a strength coach do it for the first time, like be there for the first time we did it. After that, she wasn't around. But so we would sort of be corrected initially, make sure we were doing the right exercise to target the right muscles. But in most books, like you don't kind of have that feedback from the external person. And this book is, I guess, the closest thing to that, is what I'd say. Also, the explanations are really well done. And I like the common injury section, but it's not very extensive. It does have certain common injuries in the back. And really, what it provides is a nice, clear roadmap for recovery. But it's not exhaustive in
Yeah, it's not
terms of a
necessarily
section.
going to have your injury in it.
No, like currently, I have like hamstring issue, and I think that's not the injury that it has. Like, it doesn't have that one. I mean, he does talk about hamstring injury in the book itself, in the body of it, but he doesn't have like a section in the common injuries, and I think it is a pretty common injury also. So, yeah, overall, I mean, I was pretty impressed with this book.
Yep. So I think we're definitely both going to be dipping into it as we try and get strong for next season.
I guess who would we recommend it for? I guess it's the person that wants to get into some strength training but doesn't know where to start or just wants to know how to do the exercises. So, you have all the photos.
If you've never done many exercises and you don't kind of go to the gym really, and you've been injured in the last couple of years at any stage, you could benefit from this. If you feel you're maxing out with respect to your training program, or you're sort of hitting the limit of what you think you can put into a running on the road and doing various types of runs, you could probably benefit from this book in terms of getting some hints of other things to do. He has a very nice section on form, I think, in terms of telling you the sorts of things you could look for and the sequence in which you would work on them, because you can only work on one thing at a time. It's rather nice.
Yep.
And maybe we'll have to get Matt on again at some stage.
Might have to do that because we only just scratched the surface. Thank you for listening to another episode of Running Book Reviews. Alan just put duct tape on his mouth so that he wouldn't talk over me during the outro. Big thanks to Matt for spending time with us today and for providing review copies of the book. If you'd like to leave us feedback about how we can improve the podcast or want to suggest a book that you'd like us to review in a future episode, please leave us a comment on social media. We are Running Book Reviews on Facebook and Instagram, and on Twitter, we are reviews_running. Please also follow us on social media to find out about new episodes when they're released, or you can just subscribe to the podcast on your favorite streaming platform, and they will be downloaded to your phone immediately. If you've been listening for a while and are wondering how you can help us out, there are a few ways. If you're enjoying the podcast, you should spread the word, tell your friends, share a link to your favorite episode, maybe share a link to this episode if you're still listening, because
do it now. Do it now.
Because this one can benefit everybody. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts if that's how you listen to your podcast, or you can rate us on Spotify out of 5 stars. And we're also on Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy us a coffee if you feel inclined, but there's no obligation. You can follow us on Buy Me a Coffee, and so if you do follow us, enter your email and all of that stuff, then if we post anything, you'll usually get notified by email. Sign up and follow us. See what we're up to. Bye for now.
Bye.